This podcast represents my opinion and the opinion of my guests. This is not medical advice, and I am not establishing a patient-physician relationship with any listener. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only. And because each patient is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions you may have. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody? We have Seth here today, our producer. Vanessa is here with us in spirit. She's nowhere else but with her baby. It's been a month now postpartum. She's doing fantastic. I had lunch with her the other day. I think she misses us all. Today, I'm going to talk about just a topic that interests me, and I bet you it's going to interest you. I'm going to have Seth here to bounce some ideas off of, but I'm going to talk about expecting more from yourself, your healthcare practitioners, and the medical system. Welcome to the Not Your Doc podcast. Well, you know, I'm going to set up the issues that I come across enough times that it sticks in my head. I put it on my blog. I want people to expect more from themselves, their healthcare professionals, and and from their own health. Recently, Jamie Foxx, we didn't know what happened to him, but he's been in the hospital probably a month now. Sounds like a stroke. He's had long-standing hypertension, and we've not really heard everything, but significant enough that it sounds like he's in rehab. And Tina Turner just came out not too long ago. She just passed away. Wonderful singer. She talked about kidney health, and the number one cause of kidney disease in the United States is hypertension and diabetes. And my suspicion is that's what she was talking about. So it just reminds me how many people end up having morbidities and mortalities. This is illness and death way too soon. This is a loss of our loved ones, a loss of people who produce wonderful things, and it's a shame to lose them to basic, common, routine medical issues that can be prevented or treated more aggressively. Now, it's not all, of course, on our medical system, our physicians or nurse practitioners or physician's assistants. It's really about people understanding healthcare and prioritizing it higher than I bet you better than you and I do. I certainly get up in the morning. I worry about my family, money, the house, the car, my in-laws, my brothers. All these things are important to us. And somewhere buried in number 19 or 20, we think about our own health. Because if it ain't aching, it ain't hurting, it ain't costing us money, by golly, it can't be any higher than my car, this morning, making sure that it can start and getting to work so we can make some money so we can pay for our responsibilities. So part of what I'm going to talk about whenever I talk about our own health is actually prioritizing it consistently. It doesn't have to be every day, but consistently. And so this is what we're going to talk about. We certainly talk about certain topics that come to light because of how our news media highlights certain issues. If there's mass shootings, if there's economic problems, et cetera. But certainly the chronic low-grade stuff, our chronic diseases that eat away at our lives and our ability to enjoy life is the biggest topic. There are acute things, accidents and surgeries that are acute issues. I'm not going to really discuss that so much today. But it's the chronic stuff, the hypertension, the diabetes, the obesity, the depression, the sleep apnea, the autoimmune things that kind of nibble away at us and rob us of so many things and pile up on my desk of stuff I have to worry about and think about, and therefore send you out for more tests and send you out for specialists. So you can see how we can kind of get started with something that's not too dramatic, hypertension that you won't feel for decades potentially before you have a stroke, heart attack, or kidney failure. So what I'd like to talk about is how I see it as an internist, as a physician of 30 years. So last night, I sat down with a consultation with a wonderful woman who's in her late 70s and her adult daughter. The patient came to me for depression and treatment with ketamine. But what caught my attention is all her medical needs, her internal medicine needs, her general medical needs. This patient was a wonderful patient. She had 11 prescription medicines, and she probably needed a couple of more because she hasn't seen a couple of her specialists recently. She has one over-the-counter medicine. She sees 9 different physicians, not all at the same time, but over time. And just reminded me, by the end of the visit, I talked a lot more about all her other medical issues the oxygen at night that she's not using, her arthritic problems, inflammatory issues, her sleep issues, all these things are not always necessarily directly related or caused by depression, why she was coming to see us for. So it was nice to put on my internal medicine hat, but then I took off my hat and said, hey, there's a reason why I stopped doing internal medicine a couple of years ago. I was repeating myself, whether it's the same patient over many years. So if I saw a patient for 25 years, 4 times a year for the diabetes for over 25 years, so that racks up 100 visits. And I will guarantee you that I never thought about, quote unquote, curing that diabetic. I always thought about how I can control their sugars, whether it's more medicines or dietitian, weight loss, et cetera. But I never talked about cure. We don't talk about curing any of these chronic conditions, obesity, depression, inflammatory arthritis, et cetera. And that's part of it is because we're not taught like that in medical school. We never tell anybody we're going to cure the hypertension. We're going to control it. We're going to prevent end organ damage. We're going to prevent the retinal bleed, the strokes, the heart attacks, the kidney failure. But we never talk about cure. Essentially, cure for me is taking care of stuff. So that either this is after you have the disease, taking care of lifestyle and other issues to the point where that you don't have to worry about seeing the doctor and continuing medicines anymore. And this is hard to expect because once you're diabetic, you're always a diabetic. Once you have heart disease, even if you lose weight and stop smoking, you always have heart disease. You may not be having active diabetes problems or active heart disease problems, but you still have the signature issues that led you to coming to see the doctor in the first place. People talk about decreasing healthcare dollars, decreasing the cost of healthcare in the United States. I kind of laugh at this. Back whenever I was an undergrad at the University of Illinois, we had a philosophy class. We were sitting out on the quad, and the teaching assistant asked, "Is healthcare a right or is it a privilege?" And because at that time it was costing 11 to 12% of our GDP, our gross domestic product. Nowadays, our healthcare is about 16 to 17%. Certainly, healthcare provides for a lot of jobs, physicians such as myself, nurses, nurse practitioners, billers, hospitals, hospital administrators, everything, pharmacies. Healthcare is a big, big industry. And it's not just about taking care of ill people, but certainly we focus on that because that's how we get paid. We could take care of people for prevention, not very well, but for after people have enough hypertension to cause kidney problems, et cetera. I remind people the big names on big buildings at hospitals are oftentimes not for prevention, it's for treatment, fancy advanced treatments, and that's why these people, these hospitals can build big buildings and get donations to put somebody's name on it. It's not necessarily for prevention. The vast majority of these is for advanced treatments where the horse is out of the barn. So I want people to understand that a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about, it's chronic diseases are preventable. And once you have the disease, you could potentially cure it. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to stop seeing doctors like I hoped or stop all your medicines like I hope. But I want people to think totally differently. People think that the primary care physician is the cheapest guy or gal in the whole link in the medical system. And that's what insurers believe, and that's why they drive people to see primary care doctors or nurse practitioners or physician assistants, because they believe specialists and hospitalizations and ER visits are expensive. Primary care doctors are relatively cheap. The problem with primary care physicians is by the time you see me for hypertension, and I have to rack up 2 or 3 or 4 medicines for you for your diabetes or depression or sleep issues, that eventually that also adds expense, and eventually I have to send you a specialist, which adds more expense. I have to send you to testing. I have to add more expense. So even though I may be a primary care doctor and don't deliver babies, don't fix broken bones, don't do surgery, what I can do is write for a lot of things, whether it's testing or send you to expensive medical practitioners. And so we'd like to prevent even having to see somebody like me. And how do you prevent seeing a primary care physician? I'm not saying don't get a primary care physician if you have illnesses or symptoms. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is from your youth. This is not what we started talking to kids about. We have them do sit-ups and push-ups and pull-ups in junior high and high school to do all sorts of presidential fitness testing. But what we don't say to people is how to stay healthy and fit mentally, physically, emotionally throughout the next 50, 60, 70, 80 years of their life. So I want people to understand that all this stuff really happens in grade school and junior high. Some of it's fun for competition and for becoming a sports fanatic, et cetera. But a lot of sports that you do as a youngster, you're probably not going to be able to do as you grow older in order to stay fit. So that's the first thing. There's a whole big area of decreasing stress in the family, avoiding childhood stressors that are such as abuse. Those are big things that help determine health down the line. Well, I'm going to skip over that for right now, although that's extremely important. But fitness and how we eat and how and mental health in the youth is really where it starts. Believe it or not, decades later, these people show up, and I still hear about it 40 and 50 years later about the difficulties that they had in their home life, the difficulties they had about their school life, the bullying, etc. I hear about it literally decades later whenever people come see me, whether it's for depression or any other chronic medical condition. So I'd like to start in our youth. It's not going to be high science. You don't have to see a physician in order to understand how to eat better and how to decrease stress and how to exercise. That's not necessarily the physician's position, but we have other healthcare practitioners and other people who know exactly what to do. And science is always changing about diets and kids and all sorts of other things. But there's information out there, whether you go through .gov, U.S. government websites, or you follow certain practitioners that have deep interest, whether it's in longevity. So you start in your youth. Heart disease starts in our youth, believe it or not. These fatty plaques that line our arteries start in our youth, and that's from some of it's genetics, but some of it is our diet and exercise already in our teens and preteens. So that's where we can start. Typically, if you ask your pediatrician or pediatric nurse practitioner, et cetera, they have some advice and some direction for select things. But a lot of times, you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork yourself for yourself or your family. If you're an adult, youngsters, they could do a little bit, but it's not quite the medical information, the healthcare information is not quite set up for youngsters to read. So you're going to have the adults who love them have to interpret some of these things, and you can do it as a group. Kids go through milestones typically at the same ages, so you do it as a group in terms of everything from bullying to nutrition, et cetera. You can't always wait for the schools to take out vending machines that have crappy snacks. You sometimes you're going to have to do some other things, and you can't quite follow the herd whenever it comes to childhood health. But it's a good start to start with your pediatrician. There are a lot of .gov websites that are very give you excellent basic information, and that's kind of where you start. Then the stress, dietary issues, and exercise start in your youth, climb all the way through the rest of your life. So that's extremely important. We now believe that, for instance, depression, which can start in your youth, is associated, oftentimes correlated with people who have certainly family history of depression, for instance. That's the first thing. And so some of our kids will be predisposed to depressive issues because it runs in the family. And so you'll be able to address that earlier on. You may not be able to prevent it like you would wish, but you could address it earlier on in terms of talk therapy and sometimes necessary medications. Oftentimes, believe it or not, dietary changes can potentially help address some of the depressive symptoms even early on. You have to be careful. Youngsters are growing. You have to go through your pediatrician to make sure before you try any dietary changes, et cetera. Although I tell you to talk to healthcare providers and practitioners who are not always physicians, I know some of them cost money out of pocket. I know some of them are not easy to get into. They're not on your insurance plan, et cetera. But you don't necessarily have to do multiple visits. 2, 3, 5 visits to a nutritionist is all you need as a youngster to understand how to look at food, what you can prepare yourself, et cetera. It does not have to be dozens and dozens of visits. So I want people to kind of put that as a priority, set aside money for that as a priority. If it's not covered by insurance, do it as a group. They do group sessions for health for certain health things, which could cost you much less. So there's socioeconomic determinants for depression. You can't always fix your society or your economics, but we know that that's an issue. There are dietary issues with depression that all these add on top of your genetics. And then just because you're seeing a doc or two or taking medicines doesn't mean that it's working. So you have to have follow-up if you are going to see somebody for these things. If things get better and you can back off medicines and stuff like that, you still want to intermittently check in with somebody to make sure that you're functioning well. Sometimes I can't tell my blood pressure by feel. I sometimes have a hard time taking on my own blood pressure because I use a manual cuff. So I have to have a setup where I have a manual cuff and my spouse can take it, etc., for me to kind of log it. We have all sorts of apps and stuff to kind of log information. You don't have to be too fancy. I tend not to trust electronic cuffs, but that's the one thing. The first thing is childhood stress, childhood exercise, childhood dietary stuff. Obesity is part of that, and early diabetes and prediabetes is part of that. A lot of pediatricians tend not to do a lot of testing. They'll do some spot checks as long as you don't have any big family history for anything. But it may be worthwhile, especially if you have significant weight gain or you're on medicine that make you gain weight for depression, etc., to have more blood tests to make sure your cholesterol, sugar, and liver and kidneys are doing fine. And then you go from there. And you can check that a couple times a year, once a year. So that's the first thing. The next thing is exercise is a big deal, and if you're a wrestler, you may not be able to wrestle after you get through, grade school, for junior high and high school. So it's not necessarily the best way to stay fit, but resistance training is a big deal. We've talked about aerobic fitness for many years, many decades. Your ability to heart and lungs, aerobic, using air without going into anaerobic cycles, but it turns out probably resistance training is a big deal in terms of having enough lean body mass and being able to stay fit. Yes, we want you to be able to climb the stairs and run after your dog. That's aerobic fitness typically. Anaerobic fitness, which is part of the resistance training, is kind of explosive, big muscle group use, and that is important. We don't stress that enough in our youngsters. We're not talking about becoming muscular. We're talking about resistance training to help you keep your muscle mass. Your muscle mass probably starts dropping probably in your late 30s, early 40s. You can't maintain it forever, typically in general. I'm not even talking about bodybuilders and powerlifters, but that turns out is a big deal that we should start. And it turns out that aerobic fitness and resistance training is also important for our weight control later in life. It also is important for our mental health. So it turns out that exercise is extremely important. You always want feedback, numbers, either blood pressure or weight, waist size. Sugars, cholesterol, you want feedback. It's not very hard. I'm not talking very fancy numbers, very expensive stuff to get. But you want feedback to make sure you're going in the right direction, that if you decide to change your diet and you do lose weight, that your lipids, your cholesterol and cholesterol looks okay. Because you lose weight doesn't mean everything becomes normal automatically. Then when you so the typical things that we don't sense until it's kind of too late are blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes or borderline diabetes or prediabetes or metabolic syndrome. Those are things that rack up end organ problems without the symptoms. Those are the big ones. Sleep disturbances. It turns out sleep disturbances where we don't sleep normally. Typical normal sleep is you go to bed, you could drop off to sleep within 30 minutes if you're not watching TV, etc. Stay asleep the whole night. Get up 8 hours later, and yes, 8 hours is about the target. Believe it or not, there are very few people who can get away with less, and some people need a little bit more. But about 8 hours. If it's broken up throughout the night for a lot of reasons, you still may feel exhausted the next day. And it's worthwhile to talk to a professional if you find that you're sleeping 8 hours, but it's broken up, or you can't sleep 8 hours. There's a bunch of reasons, usually psychological. There are sometimes physical reasons why you have disturbed sleep or broken up sleep. Dietary stress and exercise, specifically resistance training, is important. All sorts of stuff can interfere with any of these. Money, where you live. If you don't have good access to reasonably priced food, if you can't go outside to exercise because of the weather, because of the dangers in your neighborhood, those are all big things. Then the next thing for general health that helps prevent people from coming to see me eventually or having to have too many medicines from me is deep personal connections with people. Your ability to communicate, to express yourself, to have somebody that has your back, your ability to talk to somebody. That's the other big thing that we find missing many years later when I have to take care of people with fancy medicines like ketamine. So these things can help out significantly. When you exercise, if you maintain, especially resistance training, and some better proper eating, you tend to have less obesity. Less obesity means typically less sleep apnea, and also less obesity tends to have less degeneration of your knees and hips and ankles, those weight-bearing joints that have to hold your body weight up against gravity. Those things degenerate faster whenever you're heavier. So also exercise eventually, many years, decades later, will help prevent you from having osteoporosis so early. If you had proper body weight and proper nutrition, and you exercise with the resistance, some weight-bearing exercise decreases your risk of having osteoporosis many decades later, both men and women. So these are kind of some basic things that help prevent people from coming to see me, or if they see me, things are not as bad as they could be. Certainly, by the time a patient is in their 80s and is on 11 medicines or so and seeing 9 doctors, it's hard to say, well, I'm going to get myself better and I'll be able to stop all that. You won't be able to. But it also makes it easier to control your blood pressure with 1 pill or 2 pills, or lower dose of 1 pill or 2 pills, rather than max dose of 4 or 3 or 4 pills like I have had. That every time I saw a diabetic, they haven't lost weight, their sugars are starting to go higher, but I can control it because I can add more medicines, more pills, more shots. Their numbers are great, and they've not had a stroke or lost their vision or have peripheral neuropathy from diabetes. But they're also on 3 and 4 medicines from me to make sure, to ensure that. People complain about side effects of medicines. They complain about the cost of medicines. They complain about having to go down every week to refill a medicine and stuff like that, because the refills are offset from each other. They don't all expire at the same time. And all these things are preventable or can be minimized with some planning. And it really does mean that at least once or twice or 3 times a week, you're going to have to take yourself from your personal health from 19th on your to-do list to maybe number 1, 2, or 3 on your to-do list. And whether you use it Saturday morning before everybody wakes up, or whatever you want, to kind of have a game plan for yourself, whether it's what you're going to eat, or looking forward if you're going to go to a wedding, deciding what you're going to eat, if you can't eat certain things, to eat beforehand, and what you're going to be able to eat during these things. If you're going to go on a vacation, that you're going to let it go, and it's all right. You don't have to follow everything to a T. So making these choices and decisions are easier if you kind of pre-plan these things. The other piece of it, which we forget, you could listen to me all day long, is that other people around you, your loved ones, also influence how you feel and how you eat and how much energy you have, etc. It's not their responsibility, but they can influence it. So if I have to decide that I need to wake up and walk every morning, but my wife wants to sleep in, I have to tell her that I'm going to be out walking and stuff like that. If she wants to, join me, that's great. Or if she wants me to do something earlier than I normally would, that's fine. But I need to kind of plan, because walking is an important part for me mentally, spiritually, physically. That's the aerobic piece. You don't have to do fancy equipment. You don't have to buy fancy vitamins. You don't have to do fancy equipment. You don't have to join fancy clubs. I'm going to tell you, there's, other than buying fun T-shirts that you went on races and stuff like that, you do not need to have the most expensive shoes, the nicest shorts. You don't have to go to the 24-hour fitness places and have a $30 or $50 per month fee to join places. You can start like that. It's fun sometimes to join other people. It's fun to sometimes have, I can't do any work because I'm at the gym for the next hour and a half. That's great. But I want people to understand they could do body weight exercises. This is push-ups against the wall, push-ups on the ground, chin-ups are a little harder to do. Sit-ups is probably not the best, but leg raises. You could do a bunch of stuff in terms of flexibility and a bunch of stretching, etc., core strengthening that does not require, except minimal, if any, tools. And it's out there. Thank God we have the internet. It's out there. You don't have to start feeling guilty that you don't have the best, or you read one way how to do something, next week you read another way how to do it. You feel bad because you're not doing it right. Pick something and you work on it for a few months. 2-3 months, see if it, as long as it doesn't hurt, as long as it's not causing you problems, see if it makes a difference that you notice. Anything that you try, whether it's diet or exercise, it's going to take, depending how where you are in your fitness, could take several months before you feel good or feel right about doing some things. There are all sorts of apps. There are all sorts of other things that can help. And there's remote coaches. So you don't have to, if you don't have one locally, you can even find remote coaches for cheaper sometimes than going to a local gym. So there are a bunch of options for you, stuff like that. Yep.
So there's a book I stumbled across. You just answered. Seth. You already answered all my questions. I had a whole list of questions here, and you breezed right through. No, but really, we were talking about physical fitness, one of my favorite topics. There's actually a book called Never Gymless. Came out a while ago. You probably find it online still, and it just teaches you if you don't have a gym or anything. It teaches you. It's a whole book about working out, self-resistance all around the house, and then just some household items you could use as well. Because self-resistance is really I do it a lot. I do it probably more than actual weightlifting.
Yes,
because I think it's really important. That's very natural. You should be able to push your own weight off the ground. Yes. You should be able to lift yourself out of bed or lift yourself up if you need to, or jump over a fence if a dog's chasing you.
Basic
we've all
safety.
Been there,
Yes, basic safety stuff.
And sit-ups don't go all the way up. If you're like, oh, sit-ups hurt and I don't get anything because you're going all the way. I don't care what they taught you in PE in 1987. You don't go all the way up. You go.
That's right.
45 degrees, right when that top ab is like, and then you slowly let yourself back down.
And leg raises. And so,
I have great abs. I can teach you.
There you go. That's perfect. Yeah. And so that's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Seth. Because a lot of us feel guilty because we're not doing it right, or we're afraid we're not going to do it right.
It's discouraging, and then you don't want to do it.
That's right. And you're scared. And if you hurt yourself, that's one of the things I tell people.
I tell people when you start working out and you get discouraged, keep in mind you're not in shape yet.
Right.
It's going to suck for a while. That's what the hardest thing. And it's once you start getting in shape, your workouts, instead of feeling crummy the rest of the day, you need to rest. I work out in the morning if I have a lot to do because it actually wakes me up and gets the blood flowing and I feel good. So once you do get into shape,
I'm glad
it's much better.
It's
and quit smoking.
Yeah, well, thank you for
8 years tobacco free. Quit. That's the number one thing. If you're gonna smoke, don't worry about anything else.
That's right.
Quit smoking before you worry.
Smoking is if it robs you of practically everything health wise, everything from cancer, cardiovascular disease, strokes, dementia, and so that's absolutely right. So part of it is that stop being afraid, stop being sorry, stop and just do it. And as we all know, routine outdoes perfection. So a routine, you can start 5 minutes. It doesn't. I know eventually we want you to do 40 or 50, 40 or 50, 60 minutes a day, most days of the week. But start out 5 minutes. Start out 3 minutes. Start out 5 push-ups. Start very small. It's not. You're not in high school shape. You're not in junior high shape anymore. So give yourself, like Seth says, I would tell people, give yourself 3-4 months to finally feel good about yourself. Because in high school, if I wanted to go run cross country track, I felt it was sore for a week or 10 days, and then I'd be done and I'd be fine. But for me, it's totally different now. It's dramatically different for me, and I want people to understand that. Once again, you need your primary care doctor once you have problems or potential problems, or you're at risk for problems. But you literally can avoid a good chunk of the medical system early in life and certainly later in life if you put your priorities 3-4 times a week up on number 1, 2, and 3. And oftentimes you say, well, I'll do it whenever everybody's asleep at night. And sometimes that's great. It works out. That's your personal time. Sometimes, like Seth says, is you want to do it in the morning, that's your personal time. Sometimes you want to do it as a group. But part of it is that we need to throw the rule books out about a lot of stuff and say, what can you do and what can continue doing consistently? And that applies to me also. One of the things I tell people is that in order to take care of yourself, you have to address some of the other issues, whether it's money issues or relationship issues and stuff. And that's it's hard enough to get up and do stuff for yourself, let alone other things that rob you of mind and energy, your mental state and your energy, and sometimes your money. So that's its own separate talk. People may need therapy, may need other things to help them unload some of the stressors and worries and chronic issues that they can't fix themselves. I think I'm a bright guy, but I always don't have perspective. That's why I have Seth. That's why I have Vanessa. That's why I have a spouse.
That's why we have Vanessa.
That's right. We have Vanessa. Because people challenge me, and I used to be irritable because I know better. But the answer is, when people ask me questions, it's great. This comes to me. But when they challenge me about what I say, I stop worrying about that. It's not about me. It's me understanding what other people see, and maybe I need to learn something new that they've read about because they're more interested than I am. So find the right people, get your tribe. It could be 1 or 2 other people. Sometimes it's your kids, sometimes it's your cousin, sometimes it's your old coach. pick small things, very small steps, whatever it is, to decrease eating out or decrease soda, whatever it is, start small things, and do a checklist. It's going to take months. It's going to take months, and you could pat yourself on the back every day. If I do 5 push-ups that I didn't do last week, that's 5 more push-ups, and that's a dramatic increase.
10 more.
10 more. So
punish yourself. If you skipped 5 tomorrow, you got to do 10. We're doing military style.
Military
Did you know
style.
if we were late to formation, it's to company, it's a push-up for every second.
So. We don't.
If you're 10 minutes late, your day just got really long.
That's right. What happens when we were growing up, what Seth is saying is that we were punished for underperforming and stuff like that. And the answer is, you're your own boss now. You don't have to eat your peas if you don't want to. You don't have to exercise if you don't want to. But the end result is you want to, and that's why we're here.
And they got great supplements too for people that don't like vegetables. I like veg. I'm not big on fruit because of the. There's not a lot of fruits I particularly like. Yeah. Plus, I know that they're pretty damaging to the enamel. So I try to. I like. Yeah, I'm a veggie guy. We have check out our roasted veggie episode if you haven't. It's actually probably one of my favorites, to be honest.
I'm glad, and we'll do more of these things. But toss the rules out. Most of the rules out. Let's get you feeling better about yourself because you're doing something. You're making decisions about yourself and doing more for yourself. Asking for help, giving yourself permission for it to take longer. And we'll be back with more information. Yeah.
Well, we also want to get rid of the negative stigma around. I wouldn't really call it negative stigma.
Yeah.
Working out is all about looking good. Like you want to look good for the opposite sex this summer
Sure.
when you're on the beach.
It can be.
That's the biggest cliche thing to say about working out. But you really mental health, physical health, it helps balance, everything out for you. And if you look good when you see yourself in the mirror, that's your little bonus there.
That's an extra. Yes, I know. We when we were younger, it was not about that. If I can bend over and pick up something, it was about how good I could look or how fast I could be.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I turned 38 this month, Doc. I'm sure your presence in the mail.
I'm turning 58. Let's see, am I right? 59. What am I saying?
There you go. I had to think about mine too the other day when people were like, how old are you going to be? I was like, 38. But it gets harder. It gets harder to get in shape the longer you wait. So don't if you're like, I'll just push off till tomorrow. That turns into next year, and then you're a whole year older, and your body's going through these changes. Guys are producing less natural testosterone.
I remind people if what you didn't do today, you don't do tomorrow and after tomorrow, 6 days, 6 months, 6 years from now, you will not have done it. So there you go. So pick a time and start small. And check it out. There's always resources out there. We're happy to talk to you. Please let us know on our website, notyourdoc.com.
There's a contact form. You can just enter your email and any message you have, and we'll get back to you.
And that's the fun site that has everything that we do.
All the episodes.
Well, thank you, Seth, and we miss Vanessa, and we'll talk to everybody later. Bye now. This previous podcast represents my opinions and the opinions of my guests. This is not medical advice, and I'm not establishing a physician-patient relationship with any listener. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only, and because each patient is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions that you may have.